Good afternoon. Welcome to Ukraine Media Center. I'm Alina Frolova. This is our third session today. It will be devoted to a very important topic which is of concern to us all. This is gender equality and the issues of gender inclusion, especially in Ukraine now during the war and during the expected recovery. When we are talking about gender, we understand that today the role of women in the economy in Ukraine at all is growing. There's quite a number of issues about equality in the army and other aspects that were made even more urgent by the war, including Ukraine's obligations as far as European institutions are concerned, where there are quite a lot of requests and demands. We are today devoting our event to the year of creation of the platform of gender mainstreaming and gender equality. We have here Kateryna Levchenko, who is the ombudsperson for gender policy, and she's deputy coordinator of the platform of mainstreaming. Stefan Kossoff, who is development director of the UK embassy in Ukraine. Olesia Bondar, who is the director of the Ukrainian Women's Fund. She's also representative of consultative panel for civil society. Markus Kohl, head of the cooperation direction of the German embassy in Ukraine. We have Evheniia Lukianchenko, who is advisor to the Vice Prime Minister on Euro integration, and Tetiana Lomakina, who is the ombudsperson for the lack of barriers. So what the platform is, what's it about, how was it formed, and why do we emphasize its significance now? Maybe Ms. Lukianchenko will brief us on this. Do you hear me? Yes, we hear you very well. Very good. I know that Valentina will guide the presentation, so please pay attention to the presentation that you will watch on your screens. I'd like to start. As Winston Churchill said, never waste a good crisis. So the basis for our platform was in the fact that we understood that this is a tectonic movement that we can drive in order to show how women can be leaders of recovery processes and how women may be drivers in these processes in order to include the gender mainstreaming and restoration inclusivity into this to the maximum. When the war is still going on, we are still strategically building up our vision and our roadmap as far as the process after our victories are concerned. For quite a lot of time, there was an idea to create a consultative body that could be the single source of information and also the source of coordination of all recovery processes, which would be a good source of advocacy as well, as far as Ukraine and its population has problems, and also to represent certain vision so that we follow the clear-cut vision and a clear-cut roadmap that we would create, and our partners would join in this so that we would in a united way see how we should proceed. So after the last conference in London, UK, we understood that the time has come to have such a consultative body. So after last year's conference in London, we started to work powerfully with international partners with influential people like Milan Verbier and Hillary Clinton. We also got to know what other platforms are at the international level, how we can borrow their experience. It turned out that there is not so much international experience and we have to create our own best practices. So within 2 or maybe 2.5 months we were able to work out the basis for this work. So on the 18th of September last year we launched this platform, and I can say that yes, we still have quite a lot to do, but we have done quite a lot already, and the success that we have achieved at the conference in Berlin is due to the coordinated work both at the governmental level and our work with international governmental and non-governmental platforms, organizations. So this is about coordination, about advocacy, a single visual, so that we do not have any duplication of activities. And of course this is a single source of information, or verified information from one channel. The platform has been created attached to the Commission on Equal Rights, where Olga Stefanishina is the head, Kateryna Levchenko is deputy head, and she will tell you more about the results achieved last year, the past year, and what we plan to do next year about international successes and national events held in Ukraine. But I would also like to say that this is now one of the efficient methods and mechanisms of our work, because we are crystallizing and working out our methods. Maybe not everything is ideal, but the work is very systemic, and the work, is permeated with a single spirit. This is for Ukraine, for the future of Ukraine, and when our partners ask how can they help us, we say there's a platform, there's clear-cut vision, please join these processes. So thank you sincerely, and I pass on to you the greetings from Olga Stefanishina, from Dmytro Kaplun, who heads the office of the Vice Prime Minister, who could not join us because of a very intensive international work. However, even after the changes that took place in the government, the topic of gender mainstreaming and gender equality will remain at a high priority, and we will work with the same enthusiasm. So thank you very much. And let's discuss the topic in a dignified way. Thank you. Mr. Stephen, the platform was launched, or actually founded, in London. The UK has always been paying quite a lot of attention to gender issues. Why such an attention? Why this is priority for the UK? Thank you.
Oh, let me take this off. First of all, I just want to say welcome to all of our partners, friends and colleagues that are here with us today. And I wish you all a hearty Dobry Den. And it really is auspicious pleasure for me to address this event today on the first year anniversary of the Dialogue Platform for Gender Sensitive and Inclusive Recovery, which, as you say, the UK has been a proud supporter of since the start. So I want to wish the Gender Commissioner and all the members of the platform a hearty, happy first birthday. I almost feel like going into song at this moment, but I won't. And I think it's fair to say, as we just heard, the platform has played a growing and important role in shaping Ukraine's recovery, and we are really pleased to be able to gather here today to reflect on what it's been achieved, but also think about the challenges ahead and the way forward. And as you say, the UK was really honoured to co-host last year's Ukraine Recovery Conference, where we strongly advocated for the inclusion of civil society and women's representation in that forum. And we are obviously delighted that that advocacy then led to the establishment of the platform. So 1 year ago today, as we heard, the platform was launched with a really, really clear purpose to ensure that gender and social inclusion remain at the heart of discussions about Ukraine's peace and recovery. So we are really proud of the progress that has been made, which is all to the credit of the Commissioner and members of the platform, including our brilliant counterparts at the Ukraine Women's Fund. You ask about the UK's motivation here, and I would say, as I'm sure many of you will know, that supporting Ukraine's victory on the battlefield is a core element of UK foreign policy, but alongside that, we are also hugely committed to securing a peaceful, democratic and prosperous future for this country. And we fervently believe that the way in which the recovery takes shape will have really important implications for the type of society and the country that will emerge after victory. And we recognise that women, girls, people with disabilities, older people, younger people, marginalised groups who are disproportionately affected by the war have very distinct needs in the context of the recovery process, and we need to be able to factor those needs into the way we do the recovery, and we need to ensure that those groups are lifted up to make contributions to that recovery process, which aligns to the incredible contributions, for example, that Ukrainian women are also making on the battlefield today. So their leadership in Ukraine's recovery and resilience building is going to be vital at all levels, national, regional, local. And I have been so honoured to meet so many inspiring female leaders, a number of whom are in this room, but also as I've travelled around Ukraine. And as far as we're concerned as the UK, it's really important that those individuals and the segments of society that they represent have a strong stake in the recovery process and in shaping the future that they envisage for Ukraine as a free, liberal and inclusive nation integrated into the Euro-Atlantic community of nations. And obviously civil society is a key part of that, and we think that civil society does and should have a key role as a driving force behind that transformation and as a powerful agent of change. As was said in the introduction, I think we have seen progress, but significant challenges remain in terms of achieving full political participation and economic empowerment for women and other marginalised groups in Ukraine. And the recovery process itself clearly offers a really important opportunity to address those obstacles that continue to hold back important segments of society and also to lay the foundation for a truly equitable and barrier-free Ukraine. And I guess rest assured that the UK continues to stand with Ukraine, both in the war and to deliver the changes in the social, economic and political life of the country that Ukrainian citizens themselves are demanding, but also to support the country's journey towards becoming a fully fledged member of the Euro-Atlantic community. And our commitment extends to amplifying the voices of all Ukrainian people, irrespective of gender, age and social background, in these processes of change and recovery and renewal. So as we gather here today, I'm also reminded of the importance that we see through the platform of the collaboration between all actors, from civil society, from the government, private sector and international partners. And the dialogue platform represents a unique opportunity to pull all these forces together, and together we can create a future where the collaboration fostered through this platform ensures that Ukraine's recovery becomes a global example for meaningful inclusion and democracy in action. So I wanted to thank everyone really involved in the platform for your dedication and your cooperation, and I really look forward to seeing this platform driving even more positive change as we head towards its second anniversary and hopefully many more happy birthdays to come. So thank you.
Дякую. Такі дуже розгорнута відповідь, і дійсно ми дуже...
Thank you very much for this rather detailed answer. We do appreciate UK's cooperation in our efforts. Dear Kateryna, I have two questions to you. The first one is brief, but please tell us what gender mainstreaming is and why this has become the key topic in the name of the platform, in the title. The speakers who were before you told us about some successes, but what these successes are and how do you measure the results? Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Good afternoon, Mr. Stefan, Mr. Markus, Ms. Olesia, Ms. Evheniia, Ms. Tetiana, who are online with us, and all the participants in this event. It's very pleasant that the idea that was born a bit over a year, last year, it was already presented on the 17th or 18th September last year, but there were several months of preparation preceding it. It now lives, it continues to develop, and it is really needed. It is needed and necessary at the national, local and international levels. However, what gender mainstreaming is it? It is not a new term. For the first time in international documents, it appeared in 1998 in one of the recommendations of the Council of Europe, which was called On Gender Mainstreaming in Politics, and it appeared in order to show that the issues that relate to gender equality on the equal rights for women and men are the components of every direction of the policy. This is not just a separate segment of policy closely related, often related to social issues, but this is also a component of economic, ecological, foreign and defense and security policy, Actually, I can enumerate all the directions of policy management. Why was it necessary to designate it as a separate direction? We have to look into history in a deeper sense and look at traditional discrimination of women who used to not have the right to education, for instance. Yes, and this right was fought for by both women and men, and the right to health protection and the right to take part in political life, to vote and then to be voted for. For several centuries, different groups and even different countries, different organizations were fighting for equal rights of women and men, which in its turn enhanced the rights of men as well. However, as a result, the policy was boiling down to the policy of improving the status of women. At the beginning of our independence, we had a commission on this issue. There was a national plan for action in this sphere in improving the status of women. However, later it became obvious that such a approach was unjust, including the approach to men's rights, because I was always asking, if we are improving the status of women, why don't we improve the status of men? These two issues have to go hand in hand with gender equality issues. It started to be formalized after the fourth international conference in Beijing. The term gender mainstreaming was not formulated there, but in its spirit, it was in this vein. So today we are saying that gender inclusion, gender approach, we of course can replace the word mainstreaming with like inclusion of gender problematics into any topic. It is important, but it does not cancel the fight against discrimination as far as gender equality is concerned. So when we called the platform for gender mainstreaming, we wanted to emphasize that everyone should work with us, that this is not only about social sphere, but also about the work, economy, and it's about inclusion in its broad understanding. That's why we have Tetiana Lomakina with us, who is the ombudsperson for barrier-free politics. On the one hand, every policy and politics about men and women, but it's also about the accessibility. I won't speak instead of you, Tetiana. So this was the history of the title of our platform. Of course, we looked into the issues of recovery of energy, of economy, but the question was where the people are. And it's about equal people, equal rights for people, not just your average person. Have I answered your first question? Thank you very much. Great details and understood what happened further. Let's take a tour, a brief historical tour about the decision of the Commission to create such a platform. We adopted the decision on the 13th of September, and on the 18th of September we held our first presentation, and we understood later that we have to have a plan and the vision of how the platform would work. We wanted this very much, and the people are here who took part in weekly discussions about how it should be built. First, we had an idea that this should be only public organization, NGOs, organization platform, but then we understood that the government also needs advocacy support to move forward the gender policy, so it became a joint effort of government and NGOs. In December, we held the strategic session, which helped us elaborate and develop our main tasks and to create the plan of our activities. So I'll name several components of this plan. Providing the coordination between state bodies and other subjects, different events, and we think that our great success was the event on the March. It's on the 68th session on the status of women in New York City, because we want to involve more international partners in our Ukrainian platform. From the capital, as diplomats say, because the recovery of Ukraine, of course, depends on the international assistance that we get. Our international work became successful because we wanted very much the international support, and we wanted to have an international structure that would support us. So after the conference in Berlin, such a structure became the Alliance for Gender Recovery, gender-based recovery. We had to understand what the suggestions and proposals are that we can make in lawmaking, and I have to note that on the 18th of March this year, the Cabinet of Ministers has adopted the Ukraine Facility Plan, and it does contain the chapter about human capital, which is very gender sensitive, and it has a separate subdivision on these issues. And you understand that this is the joint work of experts, the government, NGOs, and it was very important that in that last summer, in parallel with the work to create the platform, the government group was created, and I joined this as the government ombudsperson. Yulia Sviridenko was the coordinator. Olga Stefanishina was a member of this group. All this was at a high level, and it also included gender integration issues. We, of course, held many events in order to take into consideration the standards of gender equality and inclusion. I'll quote some practical examples later. However, I would like also to point out that the new regional development strategy of the government contains a powerful gender element, and more strategic level documents contain gender equality as an important principle. You may say that this is rather boring and sad to talk about documents. Yes, I'm talking about documents, but it is because our further actions are based on documents. If we want to have stable gender policy, we have to provide foundation for it in documents. And of course, there's a interaction with international organizations and NGOs in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine. From the very start, the government was regarding NGOs as an important component of the platform, and in order to better organize this work, the consultative board of NGOs was set up, which will be dwelt upon by Olesia. What was done, what has been done? This is a large-scale work to include the gender component into the recovery plan, and it concerns also regional and local plans, and they have to take into account what we formulated on the national level. There was a huge work by some bodies like the Ministry for Regional Development. Olena Postolovska had to join us today, but she's now in Brussels and is taking part in our negotiations to join the EU. I want to emphasize that the Ministry for Regional Development does a very important work to provide for the inclusion of gender elements into regional politics, and we have provided them with a certain recommendations as far as level of territorial communities is concerned. It was also approved by the Cabinet of Ministers as a necessary element. The Ministry for Economy does quite a lot as far as training is concerned. One of the interesting aspects is not only the support for women-led businesses, but also teaching the economy. When in 2017, the survey showed that we have a crisis in this sphere because men went to the front line, and now women are learning to be truck drivers and electrotechnicians and engineers. This is the work that's being carried out at the national level and local level, and due to such approaches, colleges and vocational schools in different oblasts accept more girls than young men. In Zhytomyr region, I talked to Mr. Bunichka, who is head of the regional administration, and he told me about how they admit young people to vocational education. The state service that is responsible for training of public servants and public managers does quite a lot. The School for Public Management has worked out a number of programs to upgrade skills of B and C categories of public servants, where they can acquire certain knowledge and skills as far as gender approaches are concerned. You know, when we're talking about gender equality, we have to understand the tools that we will use. Gender-oriented budgeting, gender-oriented expertise, and other opportunities that we have are all online in the course form and accessible not only to public servants. NGOs have carried quite a lot of work due to analytical centers, and you will be pleased to hear from me that they have prepared very serious analytical papers commissioned by the government, so that we have an opportunity to look at what is there. For instance, the report by Sumy Analytical Center about the introduction of gender equality and initiatives and inclusiveness in several regions in comprehensive recovery plans, or the control list of checklist of questions for conducting such analysis, or the research about gender segregation in vocational education, the gender and legal analysis of legal acts in concerning human capital by Voxel Ukraine, the public organization Women in Media have researched the topic of gender-sensitive recovery of Ukraine and its coverage in media. And of course we have to publish it so that the public knows about it. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to present it today. We also analyzed the state construction norms and analyzed the situation with veterans. You see QR codes here, and on the site of the Ukrainian Women's Foundation you can find all those papers, and I cannot of course name everything that was done. We also carried out the analysis of the work of international partners, and in order to understand how they help us and how they can help us, because the number and the circle of our assistance in this respect grows constantly. We also pay attention to international events where we can voice our opinion, so this is a very important issue about the connection between the platform and the international alliance. We first thought that there is going to be an international group of friends, as we called it, and we wanted people in different countries to understand how important Ukraine's recovery is and how important it is to include the gender component into such recovery plans. When we were thinking about this group in 2023, we understood that before we go to a high international level, we have to have here a platform that would provide for the work at the level of oblasts and organizations and our central bodies of power, so that the international partners have the foundation, have the basis to push the principles of gender equality in huge international assistance programs, like in OECD, for instance, or other organizations. So we paid a great attention to presenting this platform at many international events. You see logos of different organizations where we presented, at whose conferences we presented our plans and work. This is not about all our partners, but only about the spaces that we use to talk about the programs. The number is growing. It is very important for us that these issues remain in the focus of attention, as well as the issue of Ukraine's movement toward victory, without which recovery is impossible, and of course necessarily the participation of women in these processes, which is also requested by international resolutions. We are glad that such partnership is growing, and the last slide I'm going to show you is about our priorities in 23-25, where we want to coordinate the issues of gender equality in all spheres through the commission coordinated by Olga Stefanishina, who is the responsible person in the government for this, but also a sectoral working group on gender equality and coordination of international technical assistance programs. We held this meeting last Friday, which was an important chance for us to communicate with international representatives. We see this as an alliance of gender-oriented recovery. Don't think that there's a duplication of functions between these structures. They have different tasks, but one single great goal, to provide for the flourishing Ukraine with the maximum use of such resources. So we will work further implementing the strategies that we have adopted. We will also decrease the gap in the salaries between men and women, and we will create the plan for future activities in the adjacent years so that this all becomes real. You have several times addressed Tetiana Lomakina. Are you with us? Yes, you are the President's Ombudsperson on Barrier-Free Society. We mostly regard barrier-free society in a physical terms, but what does the gender issue has to do with it? Welcome everyone, welcome and congrats on the anniversary of the platform. I would like to start with the fact that when we approached the barrier-free topic in Ukraine at the initiative of our First Lady, we held a lot of surveys in order to understand how Ukrainians accept and perceive this issue. And of course, inclusion and inclusiveness was perceived in a wrong way, because it was either about people with disability and their access to different services, or it was about all-inclusive holidays. We understood that it was very important to choose the word which would be understood by everyone, and would relate the desire to remove barriers. So what we are doing now is we are opening opportunities. We remove barriers to communication, to work, to any services, and we open opportunities. This is what the barrier-free strategy is about in Ukraine. Of course, you may talk about diversity, accessibility, and this is about our common agreement on what we suggest when we talk about barrier-free society, about freedom from barriers. We have drafted this wide circle of questions and issues that we are going to work with. For instance, economic barrier-free economy. This is about accessibility of work, of jobs, of your own enterprises. Or a person wants to find a job, we have to remove barriers on this person's way so that they can reach it in all senses. Educational, barrier-free education. We saw the biggest barriers in the access to inclusive education, so that people feel themselves equal with others. This was our first sphere. The second was lifelong learning, how people can change their lives during their lifetime. And it is especially important now for women, because there's a lot of offers for people on the market with jobs which were traditionally considered male jobs. However, it is important and possible for women to be able to take these jobs. Or there are trends concerning internally displaced people, where they come to other regions where there are no traditional jobs that they are used to in their own regions. So these are very understandable functional directions. Like in information, we have to present information in different formats, including for those people who are hard of hearing or people with impaired sights. This is very important, and we combine this all in a notion of barrier-free information. And of course, there's institutional barrier-free society. where we mean that we have accept and respect every person, irrespective of their gender, age, their experience. And this is about forming the social capital and the social preparedness of a community, how we develop the work and cooperation between people. So now when the public is discussing this, they say, yes, we have to also provide the lack of conflict, embed the lack of conflict into these discussions, because all this will depend on how we provide for this in our society, because our military are now heroically defending us on the front line, but when we talk about social inequality, about the lack of access for some people of their access to basic services and rights, then we promote actually social inequality, which can push us to conflicts within the country. So we are nurturing this direction, we are learning the experience in this, so that the social cohesion that we have now materializes in our joint victory, our joint works, joint education, and our common approaches to how we accept people, meet people with a war experience. This is mega important. And of course there's another layer very important to us. This is about the access to every service, educational, transportation, communal, banking services. When we are talking about barrier-free social life, it's about acceptance and about services. And this also the access to all the tools of public participation. We understand that during the war, many communities have revamped their programs of development, which were on a rise before the full-scale invasion. We have now to agree on how we will be able to continue those programs during the war, how we will be able to provide for the public participation in this, because this is exceptionally important, and it also concerns the access to referendum and justice, how today people can defend their rights. And when we collected all those visions and shades of vision, we first of all consulted the expert circles. We have conducted a lot of analysis in order to understand the needs of socially important groups. One of them, of course, is women, and women are very important in this barrier-free strategy. This year, due to our cooperation with the platform, we have prepared the plan for 25-26. The UK program supports us. We are very grateful for this support. And in NGOs that are pushing the issue of gender equality have joined us. They take active part in expert groups' work. They make their suggestions. And this is a very, very important support, because the investment that we make now into the development of Ukrainian women's movement will bear fruit, because women want to take part, women want to get involved. And another important point, when we're talking about the results, we have to understand that the result is what we can see, what we can put our fingers on, what we can smell in the air. So today we would like our efforts, the efforts of all the organizations of civil society, of the state, should unite and get joined in the coordination board on the national level, because we already have councils for barrier-free society at the level of our territorial communities. So we are glad to see that women's organizations are joining this movement at the level of communities. They make their input in how the life there should be organized according to city development plans. And it concerns not only women, but also people with disabilities, young people, people who have children with disabilities, and all this kind of stuff. So once again, thank you for the opportunity to cooperate with such a beautiful, powerful instrument, tool as a platform, and also for your openness, your support, and internal trust that is felt within this platform. And it helps us to provide better solutions for our people. Thank you, Olesia. Maybe for 30 times public organization, NGOs were mentioned here. You represent Ukraine's Women's Fund, one foundation, one of the leading organizations in gender-related issues. How do you take part? What is the consultative board that you represent here? And as a public organization, how can you influence the state policy? Welcome every speaker, welcome every person present, both physically and online. I'm very glad to join in and talk about the consultative board, because in reality NGOs, before the platform was created, were talking a lot about the lack of spaces for public organization, for women's public organizations, to discuss the recovery issues, to plan and coordinate our activities, to work out recommendations. So we were talking very much about this, about creating such a platform, and I want to thank the apparatus of the State Ombudsperson, State Commissioner, for their support in creating such a platform, and the Office of Vice Premier on European and Euro-Atlantic integration, and of course the government of the UK for their support, for the support of the work of the platform. The consultative board, in reality, was set up in order to strengthen the influence of civil society on the processes of provision for gender equality and inclusion in recovery. As Stefan said, we are celebrating a year of the platform. A bit shorter is the life of the consultative board, but the number 18 is something of a magic in this respect, because the platform was launched on the 18th of September last year. Ukraine Facility Plan was adopted on the 18th of March. Today is the 18th of September, and we are talking about our plans for the future. So I hope that this number will remain a good omen for us. I would like to share our observations on how NGOs and women's NGOs are involved in the process of recovery in Ukraine, and maybe talk a bit about our plans based on these observations. As soon as the consultative board was created, we decided to look and analyze how the NGOs are involved into recovery processes, and we held a very quick survey which showed that the recovery processes are taking place at all levels, including local and national, but really only a very small percentage of organizations are involved in these processes. So we understood that NGOs are not well informed about these processes, and we have to do something about this, because information now is very important, and you can do nothing without information. So we started to hold different meetings with NGOs. We also prepared training webinars with experts in order to fill the information gaps and to explain how recovery processes are happening, how you can take part and get involved. We are planning to do this next year as well, because information is a very important component of our lives, and in order to be efficient, you need this information very much. Then we faced the lack of data and analytical information. I'm very glad that Kateryna has presented analytical surveys today that were prepared by gender analytical centers, because we think that for us, for the consultative panel, this is a very important information for us to concentrate and prioritize the spheres where we can apply our efforts. And in the future, we may develop recommendations and pass them on to the platform and advocate them at the national level based on this analysis. We have also seen that the notion of gender responsible and inclusive recovery is being perceived in different ways, and we have to define what we mean when we talk about gender-sensitive recovery. So NGOs have prepared recommendations, 10 steps, and after I am finished with my speech, I'll ask to show a very short video of those 10 steps. This is kind of a reminder for everyone, including state bodies and partners and NGOs, which do not always focus very much on the gender issue, to see what gender-sensitive recovery is and what we should bear in mind, and do not forget while we are working on this, because sometimes you tend to work so intensively that you omit something. We also saw insufficient participation of women's rights NGOs in events dedicated to recovery issues. And although the last conference in Berlin saw a rather high representation of women's organizations, we still consider that you should keep this at a certain level, work on this, and preserve this trend, so that the voices of women's organizations are better and better heard at both national and international levels. What we would like to strengthen, what we have not embraced very well last year, this is the work with Alliance on gender-sensitive and inclusive recovery. We have started this dialogue. There's a consensus on both parts. So I think that the work between the platform and the alliance will become stronger next year. And so this is what I wanted to say. So we will have a video now. Ten steps to gender-inclusive recovery of Ukraine. The plans for recovery have to be based on opportunities for women and men, on different groups of women and men. Women's rights organizations should take part in developing plans. Barrier-free, accessible, and equal services, jobs, infrastructure, wiping out gender stereotypes as far as the roles in family, education, professions, business, and decision-making are concerned. 100% of preschool education for younger kids, daycare services and institutions for people of different vulnerable groups and ages who require care. Services and protection for people who have suffered as a result of gender-based violence. Programs on education and re-education of women, STEM education for women and girls, support for women-led businesses, entrepreneurship, programs to remove gender-based stereotypes, international technical assistance in this sphere, and the support by international partners of women's rights organizations in the processes of gender-sensitive and inclusive recovery. This video was possible due to the support of the UK government. As several times the conference in Berlin was mentioned, and one of the steps here was also about the foreign partners' help in gender-sensitive issues. I'd like to ask Markus Kohl what? Well, we understand that the alliance is the supportive structure of the bloc of donors and partner countries, but how do you see your role and how do you plan to build up your relations with the platform, and what are your plans for the next year in general?
Dobry den. I'm glad you give me the opportunity to actually make a few remarks about this. I tend to see this all as a journey, and as I learned in Ukraine, especially if it comes to women, it's a journey which is already 140 years. And we see now this very small fraction which we are now covering, and to be honest, I mean, all what we can achieve, we achieve because we can actually build on what the ones who came before us already built. And this is also how I see it a bit with the platform and the alliance. It's basically, we had, and you can really see it from, if you just look at the URC. So in Lugano, gender responsive recovery was already in the principles. And then thank you to the Ukrainian government and the UK in London, it was possible to actually create a momentum and establish the platform, and also thanks to the civil society being a very integral part of it, which is a huge step forward to basically, as an economist I would say, working on the demand side, on the government side, on the political side, making sure the lawmaking, the foundations are actually addressed, and that in Ukraine the discourse is actually strengthened. And then building on that, and I think it was also only possible because we had this platform already, we had these discussions, and I remember we had a roundtable with our development minister where civil society and other donors were around the table, and there were actually 10 steps presented to the Ukraine Recovery Conference, which was a very, very good push in the right direction. And I think this exchange was also only possible because the foundation was already laid at the London conference. And so, in line with the German feminist foreign and development policy, we wanted to amplify that and create another momentum, making sure that all these processes are actually mutually amplifying each other and working more on the supply side, if I am allowed to stay in my economist terms of. So the idea was we come together, and of course the UK is also part of it. The Ukrainian government, thank you, Kateryna, Evheniia, the office of Stefan, 29 civil society organizations, including the Ukraine Women's Fund. They were all at the launch, and it was a great push and a great momentum. And now we want to use this alliance to work with basically, as I said, the supply side on the 3 R's. Increasing resources for gender responsive project management, basically. So making sure that donors even more strongly include the gender perspective in all their development programming, in all the different sectors which we're talking about. It's about representations of women, finding ways also as donors, how can we better include women in our decision-making processes, but also make sure that women are represented in the national sphere. And I think that's one of the greatest touch point where we are actually working closely together with the platform. And of course, all this including women's rights and needs being at the core of everything what we are pushing forward. So to facilitate that, we also made sure that we work very closely with the donor coordination mechanism on gender equality under the co-chairing of Kateryna, Sweden, Canada, Irina Postolowska. There's a sectoral working group where donors come together, and we of course included all those. The co-chairs of the sectoral working group are also part of the core group of the alliance to make sure that all our thinking is immediately aligned. And then hopefully together with the broader alliance, as I said, 29 civil society members, 16 countries, 17 international organizations. And then also widen the focus a bit by also including private sector, that all we together can then all work on this supply side. And not only on a national level, but by all our discussions we have and try to advocate for more money and funding and capacity for women. Sensitive project management, but also internationally, hoping to, and the first will be the Beijing Plus 30 event in Geneva, where we will also present the alliance and make sure that also the donors and also the participants there be aware of the need and the ideas which we try to push forward, and finally to create a more fair and inclusive society in Ukraine, as it already started 140 years ago. And of course it's still a journey, and it will of course have to continue. And I think one of the main mutual goals the platform, the Ukrainian side, we will have is also how to promote this topic at the Italian URC. That will be the next also important step, that we make sure the topic is further elevated and that we together can convince the Italians. Sorry, no Italians in the room, I guess, but convince the Italians to keep up and not falling back behind what we already achieved. So really making sure we build on what is already achieved. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Якщо в аудиторії є питання, будь ласка, ідентифікуйте підняттям руки, а я поки хотіла би ще задати пару питань. Пані Катерино, напевно, це до вас і до пані Олесі. Чого ви хочете досягнути на другу річницю? Який план, які основні пріоритети стоять зараз попереду? Над чим ви будете працювати?
And what will you be working, what are going to be your achievements by the second anniversary? It is very important to look forward. I would like to continue what Markus has started to say. It is very important for us to preserve the impetus of this movement, both at the national and the international level, because it is often not simple to start the process, but it is even harder to continue with it. That's why we expect more cohesion and more specific work. We will continue to implement our platform's plan. I think that we will correct and amend it by the beginning of the next year. This is going to be a very right decision because it will be 12 months by then time, and we will be able to report on it, because reports are important not as part of the bureaucracy, but as a component of transparency. It is very important to us that the documents adopted at the national level, like Ukraine facility plan or the state strategy, are implemented at the local level. Localization should go on, and I see here a powerful resource in the 1325 coalition, who are established in 25 in the 20 regions of Ukraine, not in 19, because Poltava has set up the coalition as well. And we expect very much that after very productive meetings in Cherkasy and the support that we got there from the head of the regional administration, within weeks we will have such a coalition in Cherkasy, Mykolaiv, Ivano-Frankivsk and Ternopil, which means in all regions of Ukraine. These very strong local platforms will help us implement our ideas at local levels. We will continue our international advocacy. We have already planned with German and UK governments an event at the margins of Beijing Plus 30 conference in Geneva. We will talk about the aspects of recovery that our international partners have to know about. And of course, we will talk about the events that we plan to hold during the 69th Women's Conference. I do hope that we will be able to hold a meeting in this respect together with you and women who are our partners. We launch trainings, including the use of gender markers of OECD, the markers that pertain to the projects of international technical assistance. These projects can be marked as either directly or indirectly aimed at gender equality, or they are not aimed at it at all. It seems to be very simple, 1, 2, 3, but in reality this gives us an opportunity to see what resource is being put at the national level into this cause, and it is very important for the donors to understand how it works at a global level. We have planned these trainings for October. We will continue our analytical work with public organizations and NGOs. So on the one hand, we have a task to work at a local level, but undoubtedly the high international political level will provide us with more opportunities to reach better results. And as I said, Ukraine has to stay in the focus of attention, and this is our common joint responsibility. Yes, we unequivocally join what Kateryna has said, but I would like to add that in principle this year we will strengthen the capacity of women's organizations to be more outspoken and better heard in recovery processes both at national and local levels. We will, of course, create opportunities for NGOs to share their experience, to coordinate, to work out recommendations, to do everything possible so that we move forward and have a progress in working out the plans of gender-sensitive recovery. And we plan that we will develop proposals for the platform itself, for state bodies and partners, suggestions on advocacy at the national level, what has to be done there, and what the priorities should be there for our consultative panel, which will develop recommendations for the platform. I think that this is a very good note to finalize our discussion, but I would like to finalize with saying that we are glad that you came to Ukraine Media Center. This is the grassroots initiative, the space that was created during the full-scale invasion to support our state and society, and we designated as priority for ourselves that we want to have more information and disseminate more information on recovery, on the initiatives of public society, civil society, and the governments. And one of the topics that we systematically cover is the gender issue and gender equality topic. So we are glad to use this opportunity to sign the memorandum of understanding and cooperation with the Office of the State Commissioner on Gender Policy, Ms. Kateryna Levchenko, and we undertake to provide this space, and we invite every NGO or state or local organizations to come to us with your information about women's involvement, about gender rights, about protection of men's rights, about the protection of rights of everyone who needs the protection of their rights. So these are the copies of the memorandum signed by us. We are grateful, and we will be glad to continue our communication. And with this, I declare this panel closed. I'm grateful to every speaker. I'm grateful to you for talking in simple words about a complicated issue, and I do hope that there was absolute gender equality of those present during this panel, and the number of women present in this room says that Ukraine is going to be one of the states that treats equally people despite the gender that they belong to. And this is one of the reasons why Ukraine is a member of the European family. Thank you.